Delighted to be here with you all and to talk about how we can involve students in family school partnerships. I, as a faculty member and Max as a grad student, are very interested in this and do a lot of research on this. And so what we hope to do is share some information, not making it very researchy, but really just giving you some strategies for some things that you might consider trying out. So the objectives for this session that we hope you get out of it is first of all, is that you'll be able to identify ways that students play a role in family school partnerships from research. What are the possibilities for what they can do? What are the different ways that you can go about doing it? Second is to describe a few reasons why considering the role a student plays between home and school is important. Why would we want to do this? There are actual reasons why students will benefit from doing this, and those are very, very important. Sometimes I think we feel a pressure to involve students just because, well, it's just the right thing to do. But there actually are reasons to do it and strategies for doing it that can really offer wonderful benefits for the students and for everybody else in the school. And finally, to be able to identify professional and school practices to improve student confidence in homeschool interactions. And this includes how to make this really work. Giving voice to students is one thing, but giving students legitimate voice is something else. And I think that's really important, and I hope we can think about that today. Involving students simply coming to meetings, but if the students don't feel heard and honored, that's not going to be very effective. The quality is much more important, as we'll talk about, than the quantity. I'll turn it over to Max.
Thanks, Eric. And again, welcome everyone. It's great to see you here, and I'm super excited to be here. So we will start off with a little bit of an interactive activity. So you might have done this before, you might not. This is a Mentimeter activity that we will be doing. If you want to use your phone, you can scan the QR code here, or you could go to menti.com on your browser, either on your phone or your computer, and enter the code that's on the screen here. I can't see everybody now, but if people can give a thumbs up, and if Tom or Eric, you can help me see that, whether people have gone on this, then I would transition to the screen that would show the Mentimeter. But basically, as you are getting there, what we will do with the Mentimeter is we'll see quotes from either a student or an adult that we've collected from the previous interactions with a group of students here in Ohio that Tom and I had the privilege to meet. And we would like you to think about whether the quote is from a student or an adult. So you will have the chance to choose between one or the other. And so, and then we'll see kind of at the end, how many you get them right, or what are some differences between the perspectives. So I'm seeing some thumbs up in the chat. So I'm just going to stop sharing here. This is where it gets a little tricky, but I have faith in myself that I can do this. Okay, just 1 second. Okay, I trust that you can see my Chrome now, my browser. Okay, so we will just go ahead and head to the first quote here. And hopefully you can see this on your screen as well. So the quote is this: the role of a student is to serve as the liaison between home and school. Who do you think this quote come from? I already see responses coming in. Okay, so it looks like overwhelmingly people think this is coming from the adults. Okay. All right, so this one, the vote goes to the adult. We will move on. Sorry if haven't got there, but the role of a student between home and school is to communicate needs and practice leadership. Whom do you do you think this quote comes from? We're seeing again more votes on adult, but this time also more people think that it might have come from a student. Okay, the adult is getting more votes again. Okay, so it's like the case is settled here. We will move on to the next one. To support students in this role, schools can build student confidence and develop social emotional skills. Who do you think this quote comes from? We're seeing a pretty even vote here. Oh, we're seeing tie pretty much. Okay, so this one, the adult gets slightly more votes, but it looks like many of us also think that it might have come from a student. Okay, we will keep moving here. To support students in this role, schools can acknowledge values, build relationships, and train parents. Who do you think this might come from? Okay, so this is where we're seeing more votes from for the students. Okay, so this one, people think it's more likely that it comes from a student. Okay, to serve in this role well, students need communication skills and good role models. Who do you think this might have come from? So overwhelmingly, people are voting for that this quote comes from a student. Okay, now I will transition back. Hopefully we have some sense of where people are. I'll stop sharing and go back to our slides here. And let's see. Okay, so I believe you can see on the slides now that where like these quotes come from. Two things that I thought was interesting here, and I'd love to hear a few thoughts from the audience as well. But it looks like the one that where it says to support students in this role, schools can acknowledge values, build relationships, and train parents. That one, a lot of people voted for the students. We thought that this quote comes from the students, but in fact, it's from an adult. And then to serve in this role well, students need communication skills and good role models. Also, we have overwhelmingly, like the majority of people voting for students. It again comes from the adults. So why don't we hear a few thoughts from you in the audience? What do you find surprising? What are some thoughts you have about this, about what you just see? Sort of the differences between what students have said, what the adults. And I should have clarified, I guess, that the adults that we're talking about here are mostly teachers and educators who work in schools with the students. So, yeah, sorry, Brandon, that was a great point. I should have made this clear that this was not, the adults were not parents, but these were school staff or teachers mostly. So, not seeing Eric or Tom. Are you seeing a hand in the chat or among the audience?
No, not right now. So just waiting to see.
Yep. Yeah, so we can see here that there are some ideas that are aligned between students and the educators. Okay, I'm seeing some coming in from the chat. Students are very well spoken about their role and need to have voice in their education. Totally, Carrie. That was the impression that we got as well. They were also being quite specific about the sort of the support that they need, the role that they see themselves playing. Kristen, surprised that a student thinks they themselves need to practice leadership. Yeah, it's a great point that sometimes students themselves actually see that there are these skills or these opportunities that they need to develop those skills and to move forward in their education. Were selected. These are written or spoken by students or by the adults. Thanks for the question, Sarah. Okay, so we will move on. So we have a general sense that there are some, there might be some disagreements or some kind of misalignments that would point to improved communication between adults and the students. So we want to come back to this point that Eric made earlier, that we will want to think about why is this an important issue? Why do we want to talk about student voice in the context of family engagement or school-family partnerships, which is what this summit is about? So the first point that we're making here, and figure out how to turn this shut up, it's blocking. Okay, there we go. So reason number one, adolescents live and learn in overlapping spheres of influence. For some of you here might be familiar with the phrase overlapping spheres of influence. It comes from work by Dr. Joyce Epstein, who's a leading scholar in the field of school-family partnerships. But basically, it's the idea that adolescents live and learn and spend a large amount of their time in these spheres, right? Schools, families, and their community that they live in. And they are influenced by these different settings. They grow in them, are in constant interactions with those settings. And in the meantime, adolescents have developed a certain understanding and a certain perceptions about these settings. And they, and so it kind of makes sense to see, adolescents being in the middle of these spheres or these circles, and think that they should have a role in not just being influenced by them, but also have this voice or this power to influence the settings around them as well. So the bullet point here is an example of what this might sound more in a more concrete way. Adolescents can help their school and family better understand the culture, values, beliefs, and customs of each other, right? Sometimes, I think earlier in the keynote, some of you might have been attending that, the idea that sometimes the communication between school and family could be challenging. There's issue of trust and things like that. And adolescents and students could play a role in kind of bringing the two sides together more, because they understand the two sides probably better than each of the sides. So they could play a role here to help each other, to help the school and their family to better understand each other. And then with that, I will hand it over to Eric.
All right, thank you. The second reason is because adolescents' perceptions of family-school interactions are extremely influential in terms of student outcomes, in terms of students' achievement, in terms of their motivation, in terms of even eventually whether or not dropping out behavior. So first thing is to know is that adolescents often perceive family engagement differently than do parents. I've been doing research for a long time on adolescents and teachers and parents, and many, many times we've done studies where we ask the same question to an adolescent as we do to their parent, or we ask the same question to an adolescent and to the teacher, and the differences are always striking. You'd think there'd be alignment, but there often isn't. So in the same situation, the student and the parent may see things very, very differently. The important thing to know is that adolescents' perceptions are better predictive student of outcomes than parents. So as parents, and I have 2 kids, we want to think we know what's going on in our kids' heads, and we often do, but we also often don't. And what's going on in their heads, what they're perceiving with regard to family engagement, that's what's really going to drive them in terms of how that impacts their behavior, their wanting to be engaged, and any beneficial outcome that might come. And finally, this came up a bit earlier, but family engagement isn't more is better. What's really important is the psychological experiences that kids have. Brief involvement that's very meaningful may be much more influential than lengthy involvement that really isn't. So you have to think about, this is really an issue of quality and not quantity. That is tremendously important when we're trying to engage students in family engagement. Students can take many roles, as we'll talk about. They can be evaluators, observers. There are many, many different ways to involve them, but the key is that it has to be meaningful. Next slide, please. The next thing to know is that adolescents are autonomous, independent drivers of their own studies. During adolescence, one of the key transitions psychologically is that adolescents want to be autonomous. They want to make decisions. They want some independence. And we have to realize that and acknowledge that. They don't need and shouldn't have complete independence, obviously, but there's a need for them to feel like they're making decisions. This need for autonomy is very, very important in terms of their overall psychological well-being. So having them involved in engagement activities is a wonderful thing if it can promote that feeling of autonomy. And again, if they feel like it's meaningful engagement. Adolescents often are willing and eager to have their voices heard and play an active role. Many of them may not seem like they are because they haven't been given the opportunity, but when given the opportunity, and a legitimate opportunity, they want to do it. Adolescents also have preferences about the types of engagement that they might want to participate in, but few of them have the space to express those opinions or engage. So this is more a matter of opportunity. When they're given the opportunity, again, and it's a meaningful opportunity, they really blossom in those situations. And the student role, as said earlier, they can be collaborators, decision makers, presenters, and conferences. There are many options, but the bottom line is, how will the students feel that it's legitimate? Are the adults in the room really listening to the students and really making them feel heard? That's what's key. If the students feel like they're just there and you're just sort of paying lip service to them, it's not going to work and could even backfire. So the question of really making this feel legitimate to them is incredibly, incredibly important. I'll turn it back to Max.
All right. So we've been talking for a while now, and which we enjoy doing, and I definitely enjoy listening to Eric. But we also want you to have a chance to talk amongst yourself and kind of share your thoughts and experiences and learn and think with and from each other. So here's an opportunity for you to go into breakout rooms. So basically what we hope you'll do in these breakout rooms is you'll do quick introductions. Just, we're working out, but when we say organization, it could be a school, a district, or a community organization, and your role that you play in there, and talk about, maybe share a little bit about the age group you're in. We are focusing on adolescents, but, student voices, it can happen with very, very young kids as well. It would just look a bit different, but we would welcome those thoughts and experience as well. So the question that we would hope you would discuss is, what is your organization doing or has done to promote student voice or youth voice in any aspect, but maybe specifically to family engagement if there is something. We acknowledge that there is an assumption in this question that your organization has been doing something, but we also know that different organizations may be in different places or have different thoughts about what student voice may look like or how much time could be devoted to student voice and things like that. So we would acknowledge that and encourage you to share those thoughts as well. If any uncertainties around student voice, that this is a little bit more complicated than just like we're all in and let's all share what we do. There are different levels of experiences or familiarity with this topic. And just be prepared to share some of your thoughts, maybe take some notes if you like. And if you like, we'll later have a chance for you to share with the whole group. So I trust that Tom will send you into breakout rooms of 5. And yeah, please we'll have 5 minutes, just do a brief introduction and share your thoughts. Welcome back to the main room. So hopefully you've had the opportunity to hear stories, experiences from each other. So what we will do now is, here are some research-based practices or recommendations that we have for educators, teachers, or school or district administrators. So what we will do is we'll quickly go through them, and we would love to hear maybe 1 or 2 examples that you came up with that you think might fall under each of these bigger ideas. And we have some more concrete examples, but those are not meant to be like the perfect answer, whatever. But so we want to highlight your opinion or your experiences, your input first, and then share some of our thoughts. And maybe they are already covered in your responses, which would be great. So, Eric?
Yep. Alrighty. So the first strategy is to gather students' ideas about feedback on the school's existing family engagement practices. So it would be great if you could, just for the next couple of minutes, type in the chat some of the things that your organization or that your school does right now to do this. Surveys. If your school organization doesn't do anything, you can also just say, we don't do anything. Oh, students part of the strategic planning process. That's great. I haven't heard that one much. Student advisory council meeting input. Town hall. All right, well, let me share what some of the research says. So one of the things you can do, as it was mentioned, is survey or interview students, and at least once a year, maybe even more, about how the school and their families have been collaborating and communicating. And I think when you do this, it's really important to also ask the students for suggestions for how this might change. Ask them if they think it's been effective. That really, really makes a difference. And having them be anonymous is also really, really important so that students can really feel like they can be honest about things. With a lot of people use online like Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey and things like that. And I think it's really important when you do that to set it. You can actually put a setting in that says it's anonymous and tell the kids your answers will be anonymous so they feel comfortable with that. Second is to organize events or create a direct and informal setting where administrators hear students' thoughts on how the school and their families can become more effective partners. And then the last one, which I think is incredibly important, is providing feedback to the students on their input. When students are asked to give ideas and give input, and it sort of goes into a vacuum, and they don't feel like there's anything that's been done about it or that it's been heard, again, that can really backfire. So they need to know, if you're asking them for their input, give them opportunities to know that it's been heard, to know that it's been acted on. And if you're not going to act on it, that's okay, but give some feedback of why maybe it couldn't be, so at least they know that they were heard. Okay, Max.
All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and kind of move this pretty fast because I for the sake of time, but also I think we've already seen some examples in the chat with students being on the strategic planning process or team or on the student advisory councils. So we said here it's important to not just hear from students, learn about their feedback or thoughts, but also to empower them to become collaborators and decision makers in the school family engagement practices, right? So to give them not just to voice out their concerns, their questions, their comments, but also have some influence in the decision-making process. So we said here, things like invite at least 2 students on the school family partnership action team is the example that, again, Dr. Epstein used. Encourage students to form or join student councils, which is we see some of them are some of you already doing in your organization. Again, it's really important here on the 3rd bullet point that you reflect on those input, and translate them into actual change in your school. And this could include students just directly making some of the decisions or make them alongside a group of adults and administrators and so forth. Yeah, so we really appreciate all the input in the chat, but I will move over with this slide. Eric.
Yep. So the 3rd strategy is to engage students as active and equal participants in the school's family engagement practices. And if your school's doing anything like that, if you can put in the chat what you're doing, that would be great. And in the meantime, if you want to, Tom, if you want to move ahead and put the responses in, the recommendations. All right, so one of the things is to invite students to participate in family teacher conferences and lead conversations about their own learning and progress needs. This is a really interesting one because there is a lot of research that shows this is a really good thing to do. This is particularly a good thing to do with students who have IEPs, including students in the IEP meetings. A lot of research in this. We sometimes have to be a little careful with this because sometimes in parent-teacher conferences, parents also need and want the opportunity to be able to talk to the teacher privately. I remember going to parent-teacher conferences and having my kids lead them, and I thought, that was really great, that was really great. But once in a while, there were some things we wanted to just chat with the teacher about, and there wasn't an opportunity if the student was there. So there should be opportunities for parents if they want to and need to speak privately to a teacher as well. That doesn't mean anything less about including the students, though. And then inviting and preparing students to help with designing, naming, and promoting family engagement events that are appropriate and appealing to their family's values, cultures, beliefs, and routines. And this one is really, I think, extremely important. If we're going to really acknowledge the diversity of our students and involve them when we involve them in planning events and getting their input, we can really address the aspects of their many diverse aspects of their lives and their families much more accurately, I would say, when we actually ask them about that. A lot of the time, as we make assumptions, I think, about how to address issues of diversity and culture, which may or may not be the way that it actually is for the kids and their families. So asking them about that can be tremendously beneficial as well. Okay, Max.
So final strategy, we said a lot about what opportunities we could provide for students. We also think that students and teachers, educators, when we think about engaging students in these new roles, and maybe in some contexts they're not new, but we want students to play a bigger role in family engagement practices, in school family partnerships. We say that we also want to provide guidance and opportunities to practice some of the new skills. In the activity, the Multimeter activity that we did at the beginning of this presentation, students said that they would like to practice leadership skills and develop those skills. And so we thought it's important that to think about to think about how this whole process would benefit the students, not just through how their voice would impact other other school processes, other decision making, but just how engaging in these processes themselves will just help them develop these skills. And so if you've share and talk about some of these ways to help students and teachers get prepared with this work, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I also just go ahead and share some that we saw in research. Collaborating with student leadership organizations could be really helpful. Here in Ohio, there's OASL, that's Ohio Association of Student Leaders. They've organized some great events with student leaders across Ohio. And they have some resources on their website as well. But some of these organizations may be knowledgeable about different ways to engage student voice, and so they might be able to provide professional development or other opportunities for both students and school staff. And also just using school professional development time to develop or to create small multidisciplinary school professional groups to brainstorm some of the ideas. The teachers may have different thoughts than a school counselor, and school psychologists may have other things to say. So kind of bringing people with different backgrounds and different expertise together to think about all the different ways we can engage student voice is really important. And I also want to say, we see a lot of in the chat, some of you mentioned how you've been doing some of these things in other kind of domain or other aspects of school processes, which is awesome. So we hope that this will help inspire you or invite you to think about how all those student voice practices that you've been doing could apply to family engagement or to school-family partnerships.
All right, so what we'd like to do next for a couple of minutes is to acknowledge sort of the other side of this, that when we're talking about engaging students in the schools and in getting the students involved in family engagement, there are absolutely going to be concerns, hesitations, uncertainties, doubts, and I think sometimes people in the school might say to themselves, okay, really, but how are we going to do this, and are we going to do this and really do it seriously, or are we just going to do it so we can check off a box and say, oh, we included students in that? So these are real things that come up. So what we'd like you to do is, for this little activity, just for a minute, is it's called a waterfall response. And what we'd like you to do is to type 1 or 2 brief sentences expressing some concerns or hesitations that you might have, but don't hit send. When you will hear eventually 3, 2, 1, send. So type something in, but don't hit send. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, send. All right, so some of the concerns people have, they're moving. I want to remove them. They're moving quickly, but that's okay. Lack of engagement, not getting the principals to buy in. That's a really, really good point. Very realistic. Lack of trust, again, not getting the administrators to buy in. Worried that kids don't take things seriously enough to really give them a true voice. Sometimes people aren't really open to what kids have to say. Parents sometimes are skeptical about the school, absolutely. Teachers and administrators are already overwhelmed with many obligations. That's a really, really good point. I mean, particularly since COVID, that is such a reality that teachers are already overburdened, so we don't want to make this more of a burden for them. And a lack of this being a priority. Really, really good. The reason we wanted to do this was just to really acknowledge that there are some things that reality to make this actually happen. The schools and the families and the kids have to really confront some of these things so that, again, it can be, I keep calling it a legitimate experience for the students so that they really feel like they're being listened to. I'll turn it back to Max.
All right. Thanks, Eric, and thanks everyone for your responses in the chat. Those are really helpful input for us as well as we think about continue to develop these resources for and different opportunities for schools and districts. You know, all those concerns will be taken into consideration. All right, so now we want to do a little bit of kind of application of all of this. We've talked about why this is important and sort of some of the strategies. We have this, so now we want to bring everyone on the same page a little bit, which could be so we describe a very specific scenario here. We're saying that a middle school is hosting parent-teacher or family-teacher conferences for all 7th graders' families. As a family engagement expert, you have been invited to, or I could also say as a student voice expert, now that you've attended this session, you have been invited to lead or to consult, to be consulted with this whole planning and preparation process for the conferences. So we'd like you to think about a few things here. Maybe this is something that you've already been doing in your district, in your school, or that you've seen your child's school do that or not. But think about how you would involve students in your planning process, and how would you involve students in the conferences themselves, and what are some benefits of including students throughout the process, either when you're planning them or when the conferences are actually happening. And also, obviously, I didn't put it here, but just, again, any doubts, thoughts, hesitations you might have. So think about them for, let's say, a minute or two. And we'd love to, if, feel free to just post them in the chat. We're not going to do waterfall again. Just feel free to post them whenever you're ready. If you feel like turning on your microphone and share out, you can kind of use the raise hand function, and we won't have time for everyone to share, but we can take a few verbal share outs as well. So just take a minute to think about these questions. You don't have to answer all of them in your response, but whatever that comes to you as the clearest or strongest thoughts. All right. Joy says, on the high school level, when students are leading the conversation, I see more parents attend the conferences. Absolutely, that's what we've seen in research as well. I think research has just repeatedly found the same finding. When students are leading, we see more parent attendance for sure. Susan said students would share where they are in their learning behavior. It's very powerful for students and the families. Absolutely. Andrea asked students to lead a discussion. The students themselves might feel more included if they are part of the planning process. And then they might, again, thinking about family attendance, they might that might just, research has shown that when the invitations come from the students themselves, or, and again, if the students are presenting in those conferences, the parents or the families are more likely to attend. The chats are coming in pretty fast. Eric, is there anything you would like to highlight?
No, I just I saw one about letting the students, an interesting suggestion about letting them choose a theme for something they'd focus on in the conference, and that's a great idea because they might not want to talk about everything. So if there's a particular aspect that they might want to be engaged in, that might be a great way to involve them, but not make them feel overwhelmed that they have to talk about everything.
Absolutely. And here, Donna said, ask teachers to support students. So that's absolutely true. We don't want to just say, just tell the students, now you're gonna do X, Y, and Z for the conferences. But yes, constant support. We want to help students develop those skills and be actively engaged, but we don't want to just hand them the tasks and then see what they can do. We want to, we have faith in them. We want to give them the opportunity. In the meantime, we want to provide them with any resources, support, or guidance that they might need. But just, while supporting them, just make sure we are not just telling them what to do again, because that would be going the opposite direction, but to make sure to be empowering but helpful and supportive at the same time. Awesome. So we do want to leave some time for just open questions. But before that, I would just recommend some resources that we here at the Family Engagement Center offers. So this is just a reflection tool with Brief. You can scan the QR codes. I believe a link is sent, or it will be sent in the chat. You can download it and use it if you're just reflecting on those larger ideas, strategies, and think about what are we currently doing. And again, I saw some responses earlier in the chat that you're doing some of these in other aspects of the school processes, which is also great. And you can think about, if we're doing this really well with, for example, attendance, thinking about student voice in improving school attendance, maybe we can think about supporting family engagement through student voice as well. So that could be one way to think about these as well. And then two other resources. There is this research brief that we wrote. This is longer. We kind of have those 4 recommendations that we share today, but also we go a little bit deeper into kind of the research behind it, some more examples. We did want to make sure that this is kind of easy to read. It's not like really long, lengthy research articles. They're not. They are supposed to be brief, and so hopefully that would be helpful if you're interested. And if you go onto this link, which we'll be sharing in the chat again, you'll find other research briefs on other topics as well related to family engagement. And also on the right-hand side, these are the newsletters. Again, if you click on the link, it will lead you to a set of newsletters, news and guidance. But there is this issue in August that's specifically on student voice. And some of you might follow the school community journal. We also have an article that's been accepted there. It's not out there yet, but it will at some point. So if you find this really interesting and want to kind of learn more, that's going to be a longer more research heavy article. But if you feel like reading them, feel free to do that as well. But what we're sharing here on this screen is they're more accessible. You won't need too much time to read them. So hopefully they're helpful. And all right, Eric.
Yeah. So for the last, we have about 3-4 minutes left. We just wanted to open up if anybody has any questions or any points of discussion. Feel free to put it in the chat. Feel free to unmute. We'd love to hear those or comments. Would be able to share the PowerPoint. I believe so. Tom, can you respond to how that would happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So all materials are kind of being collected right now and will be on the website just below this session. In the coming days and weeks, the website that you're accessing everything on today will actually transformed to have all the materials and videos and stuff. So just come back to that page and it should be there.
Great.
Awesome. I would just say one more thing, Ed. So Christine put in the chat, thanks Christine, that there is the link to OASL, but also we have some student representatives coming to speak with us at 12 today. So if you want to hear from the students what they think about family engagement, what they think about school family partnerships, we are very excited about that session. Please join us at 12. Don't want to overwhelm you with all the recommendations, but just one last thing on at 12:45 today, we have a workshop from Professor Dana Mitra at the Pennsylvania State University. She's joining us to lead a workshop on student voice and family engagement. So that would be a chance for you to probably get some hands-on opportunities to think about, brainstorm, and practice some of these things that we cover in this session. So I will be moderating the session. So if you haven't gotten tired of seeing me or hearing me speaking, and I'm sure Dana is, I've cited and reread a lot of her work. She's amazing. And so I am personally looking forward to that session. So if you have some time, you don't have to be there the whole time. But if you can just join us for a part of it or the entirety of it, that would be great as well. 12:45. Thanks again, Christine. And we will hang around. We got 2 more minutes. We will just, I know Tom has something to say, but we'll stay here for some, if any questions or thoughts come up. But I'll hand it over to Tom.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I just want to go ahead and say welcome you all to thank Dr. Anderman and Max Zhang in the chat for their session today. I know that I really enjoyed that, and I thought we had a lot of practical takeaways actually from there. But as we wrap up, I just did want to let you know that there's about to be a 30-minute break for lunch during this time. Again, as Max mentioned, please join us at 12:30 for the lunch plenary, which will be a student panel talking on family engagement. You might have seen a link for the summit survey drop in the chat. Please only take that at the last session you attend for the day. We only need to take it once. It is tied to contact hours, so if you are someone who is seeking that, please make sure you fill out the survey. That's how you will receive them. Again, please remember that everything you can find for today is at ohiofamiliesengaged.osu.edu/summit, and I'll drop that in the chat. And I really look forward to seeing you at 12:30. So thank you all.